Thanks for tuning in to Barbershop Sports Talk.
When we look back at the dynastic Lakers of the early 2000s, where do they compare in NBA history to dynasties? Like when you think of dynasties of the turn of the century, right? You think of the Heat, if you want to consider the Heat, the Spurs, what they kind of put together, the Warriors, if you want to go back 90s, obviously Jordan's Bulls, Showtime Lakers, Bird Celtics. Obviously, there's Bill Russell Celtics in there as well. Where do you put the early 2000 Lakers when we talk about dynasties in this league?
Well, I mean, of course, you get the famous Celtics, of course, and me being an old historian, I got to go back to them, of course. But after that, most teams really didn't. Matter of fact, a lot of teams didn't even repeat at that time. I mean, you had a few teams that repeated, but for the most part, it was hard to repeat. But the Spurs were definitely a dynasty, obviously, and the Celtics. But see, the Celtics were going head to head with the Lakers to get to rain on that parade. And so, I mean, as far as dynasties, I think they flip flopped. Those two teams flip flopped. Of course, Celtics had a great team in '86, and then of course you got to go with the Bulls. So where would I put them? I would put them somewhere in the middle. I would put them somewhere. I would put the Bulls, and then I would put San Antonio. I would put the Lakers, and then the year you're talking about, the phase you're talking about, and then probably the Celtics of that era, around that time frame.
So now let's go to 2004. Now they lose in 2003. The Spurs win it in 2003. The Lakers, they come back. At this point, Kobe and Shaq are pretty much done. Like this is right. This is like the last stretch of a bad marriage. At this point, it's like they're only staying together till Jimmy gets 18. That's the only reason they're together. Like it's going south at this point. It's going south at this point. They do not mess. They're sleeping in different rooms. They're not talking to each other. At this point, it's code red. They bring in Gary Payton and Karl Malone, and they make it. Did they make it all the way to the NBA Finals? And actually, they beat the Spurs. Derek Fisher that year had the 0.4 shot.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
When we look at that Lakers team, did you think that they could have beat Detroit? Because if they beat Detroit, I think we look at this Lakers dynasty very differently.
You talking about the team they had that you just mentioned?
Yes, because they went against the 04 Pistons, Billups, Rip Hamilton, the Wallace brothers.
Well, you got to remember, and I think people fail to realize, you got an old and aging Gary Payton. You got a guy who played 17 years and 18 years in Karl Malone. They went the Gary Payton or the Karl Malone of old. And then you got them with a new system, a new offense, you know what I mean? And their careers were declining at that time. And they were both, if you look at the way Gary Payton played and the way Karl Malone played, their system that they came from was more suited to them. Whereas when they went to the Lakers, they had to more or less had to adapt to what the Lakers were doing. And I think they had a hard time doing it. So I think that team, if they got by Detroit, they probably would have won. But to be honest with you, it's fortunate and it's unfortunate because those two guys are great. Gary Payton didn't win one until after the fact, and Karl Malone never won one. So I think that was at that time. That was their hope to be able to get on the championship team. But again, that was their careers had dwindled at that time. They were not the same players that they were early in their career.
But heading into that series in '04, did you think the Lakers would beat the Pistons?
No.
You did not? Okay. Because if you just look at it on name value, some people might say, obviously you mentioned Karl Malone, Gary Payton, obviously they were older. I don't even think Karl Malone played in that series. I think he was hurt, but Gary Payton played. But you still have Kobe and Shaq. Theoretically, you still have two easily the top 5 best players in the world, even though they don't hate each other. Arguably still top 3, right? Kobe, Shaq, and Duncan, right? Those are the 3 guys.
Yeah.
So LeBron hadn't even come in yet. Think that. So when you have all this going on, why did you think that this ragtag Detroit Pistons team was going to take out Kobe and Shaq and do something that the Sixers couldn't do, the Pacers couldn't do, the Nets couldn't do, the Kings couldn't do, and the Blazers couldn't do? Because a lot of good teams tried and they all failed. What made you think that Pistons team would take them out?
All right, now see now, well, prior to that, I was a Pistons fan, so I know a lot about the Pistons history and the way they play the game. But I think that the Pistons at that time, I mean, they seemed to gel together. I mean, they had a great backcourt, phenomenal backcourt, and I think that they just seemed to play together more as a team. They had more of a team concept, and I think they did their homework. They knew how to beat the Lakers, and they had the proper players around them, the environment, the culture, the way they played the game. And if you notice that year, I don't know if you probably remember, the Lakers were not a very good foul shooting team. And I think that the Pistons, they knew they had to play damn near perfect in order to get by them, and they had the team that was able to do that. And then again, Detroit's always been known for their defensive capabilities, and I thought that the games would be close. I didn't think there would ever be a blowout. I thought Detroit had the better defensive team, and I think that they felt that they could control the game, and as long as they kept the game to a lower scoring game, that they had every opportunity to win.
When we look back, if Kobe and, because obviously, you can make an argument, right? At this point, like I said, the marriage is failing at this point. If Kobe and Shaq were good, does that series change?
Of course.
So do you think the Lakers win? If Kobe and Shaq are both happy?
Yes.
You think the Lakers win?
Yes.
Okay. If Kobe and Shaq, let's say theoretically, alternate universe, they stay together, they are both happy, they're able to meld their egos and make it work. How many rings did they win? Because they won 3.
Okay, the only way I can answer that honestly, okay, they won 3, and they still were not, we are saying in a happy universe, they would determine how many chances they would win based on the fact how much work they would put into it. We already know Kobe would. Kobe wouldn't settle. I think that, after 3-4 rings, I think Shaq would settle down and he wouldn't put forth the effort. And I think that, but if like I said, in a real world, let's put it this way, if Shaq had Kobe's mentality and his work ethic, they could easily took 5 or 6, without question. But that's a big if. That's a real big if. If they both had the same work ethic, I could see 5 or 6. How many do you think they could get?
I think 5 or 6. I mean, you already kind of just said. I mean, they get 4 and they beat the Pistons if they're both right. So that's 4. I mean, do they lose the Spurs? I mean, it'd be kind of crazy for me to imagine them ripping off like 6 in a row. But maybe they lose the Spurs one year. Shaq won in 06, so maybe they win in 06, right? If they stay, then you have 05, who won in 05, I believe it was the Spurs again. So yeah, I'd say 5 is reasonable. I think 6 would be a little out there, but it's possible. There's a world where 6 happens, but I think 5 is, I think 5 is a reasonable number.
Yes. Okay.